Hello, friendly folks and loyal listeners to the A History of Rock and Roll in Film and Rock and Roll podcast. I am going to round out the end of this month with a quick little clip from one of our Patreon episodes, just so you can get a taste of what's on that feed. It's relatively new. There's 2 months worth of audio there now for the taking, and it's a $3 a month subscription. This will be a tiny little bite that I recorded at the end of my time finishing up the Heavy Metal 1981 episode that featured the bands DEVO, Cheap Trick, Stevie Nicks, Black Sabbath, Blue Oyster Cult. In this case, there's some spillover about DEVO and Richard Branson and the Sex Pistols that I didn't really have time to focus on without making the whole heavy metal episode really, really lopsided in favor of more DEVO history. Because if I did that, then I would have added more Black Sabbath history to balance it out, but then I would have looked at what I had done with Blue Oyster Cult, Stevie Nicks, and everyone else I covered musically in that episode. Like, well, now I'm really giving them short shrift, and I've got to do more research on all of them, and then it would have taken me a whole other month. So that's what Patreon's for. If you wondered what Patreon's for, this is it. This kind of stuff. Some of it's wackier, some of it's more off the cuff, but mostly what it is in Patreon is a lot more scholarly in a way, a lot more research-oriented, a lot more almost like audiobook narration in some places. Because there's a few core books that have a lot of great rock and roll history in them that I plan to read verbatim, one half of a chapter at a time or a chapter at a time from episode to episode. So this is the kind of thing that you might enjoy if you don't see as much of a history of rock and roll and film and rock and roll podcast episodes coming into your feed as you would like from month to month. For my part, I kind of have to do this stuff to keep myself sane, because I bought too many books over the last 2.5 years that I haven't used for the podcast yet. So here we go. Another thing I left out of the heavy metal episode that I wanted to pursue more was the history of early DEVO. I think it would have been pretty lopsided if I kept going, and I wanted to just save some for the benefit of the first Patreon episode. I would like to go back to Simon Reynolds' Rip It Up and Start Again book, Post-Punk 1978 to 1984, and pick up where I left off in the narration from the episode, actually. The narration would pick up here where it says, DEVO evolved into a tightly drilled package of sound and visuals, sharing as much with the shock rock theater of Alice Cooper and the Tubes as with the no-frills punk rockers. Whenever feasible, DEVO gigs began with The Beginning Was the End, the truth about de-evolution. A 10-minute film directed by their friend Chuck Statler, whom they had originally met in an experimental art class at Kent State. The short generated the enduringly famous images of DEVO. Mothersbaugh as the mad professor in bow tie and white coat giving a lecture on de-evolution. The rest of the band wearing plastic sunglasses and colored tights, pulled tightly over their heads to squash their features, bank robber style. I also learned you should wear pantyhose if you're ever marching through the jungle for extended periods of time to stop leeches from getting into your skin. And it prevents a lot of the damage that leeches can do and their access to your skin. And also, if that's not enough, have chewing tobacco on you and you can mash it into sort of a almost, I mean, probably not like a paste because it's a leaf, but you can mash it up and rub it on your skin with some water, and that solution will actually poison leeches. They can't handle it. Can't handle the nicotine. Now you know that too. Hopefully, you're more likely to be walking through and exploring the jungle in the near future than phone's ringing. God damn it. Then robbing a bank is what I was going to say. That was my friend Michael Arms from Phoenix, Arizona. Roadie to the Aristocrats and sometimes Joe Satriani. He was going to buy... He called this morning to ask if he should buy this 5150 half stack from this dude locally. It's selling it for $900 plus like a $200 delay pedal or some other kind of or some modulation pedal. I think I forget what it was, but all for $900. The thing was beat to shit. The cabinet was, but who cares? It was all good gear. And now he's just sending me a message to tell me that, well, the guy decided not to sell it. That's the cornballs you'd have to deal with when you look for gear on OfferUp.com, apparently. That's why I stick with Reverb while I can. But I probably will have to move on to OfferUp to sell some of the gear that nobody's buying from me right now. Aren't you glad you know this now? Where was I? Oh, yeah, the pantyhose on their faces to squash their features. Bank robber style. And it was Statler who, in 1975, showed DEVO, a popular science magazine, with a feature on laser discs, then on the verge of being introduced to the market. We read that it was the same size as an LP, but had moving pictures on it, says Mothersbaugh, and we thought, oh my God, that's what we want to do. Originally an aspiring film director more than a musician, Cassell fantasized about making an anti-capitalist science fiction movie and always saw DEVO as a visual entity. The theatrics and the ideas and the staging were as important as the music. Champing at the bit to kickstart the video disc revolution, DEVO were impatient to reach the future. The 70s had been a write-off, merely the 60s sagging into decadence, supine and sour. DEVO yearned to be the first band on the block making 80s music. Like Pere Ubu, they went beyond punk, really the last gasp of 70s rock and roll, before punk even properly existed, not just sonically, with their synths and industrial rhythms, but conceptually too. They shared punk's never trust a hippie attitude, but, says Mothersbaugh, we thought the punks never learned from the failure of the hippies. Rebellion always gets co-opted into another marketing device. Selling out, using the system to spread the virus, seemed like the most insidious strategy for DEVO, who saw themselves as a postmodernist protest band. Putting out the Bougie Boys singles independently was just a step on the ladder, a way of attracting attention. The game plan was to join rock's ruling class. We figured we'd mimic the structure of those who get the greatest rewards out of the upside-down business and become a corporation, Cassell said to the Soho Weekly News. Most rock musicians, they're no more than clerks or auto mechanics. So DEVO gigs started with a bombastic synth jingle, the DEVO corporate anthem, during which the group lined up solemnly to give a salute, because individuality and rebellion were obsolete. DEVO dressed identical so you couldn't tell who was who, said Mothersbaugh. We wanted to look like a machine or an army on stage. We felt that the real mindless uniform was rock's blue jeans. Instead, the group dressed like maintenance worker geeks, says Cassell, wearing outfits he'd acquired during his stint in the janitorial supply company. They built up a mix-and-match wardrobe that blended the regimental, Boy Scouts, servicemen, football teams, and the technocratic, hazardous waste protection suits, rubber gloves. This they spiced with kitsch flamboyance, cheesy alien masks, peculiar plastic helmets styled to look like extremely bad hairpieces. DEVO also developed a tautly choreographed repertoire of jerky stage moves inspired, says Cassell, by seeing a Russian constructivist ballet. And then we played this very precise music like James Brown turned into a robot, and it really pissed everybody off. Well, not everybody. In 1977, things got confusing, at first as Iggy Pop and then David Bowie, then Brian Eno and Robert Fripp jostled to produce DEVO's album debut. Thrilling to the sensations of dislocation and menace that their music induced, Eno raved about DEVO as the best live show I have ever seen. Neil Young, of all people, the grandfather of granola rock, as Cassell nicknamed him, invited DEVO to appear in his feature-length movie Human Highway as a squad of disgruntled, radioactively glowing nuclear waste workers. Iggy Pop was so enamored that he wanted to fill his next album with DEVO songs. At the group's first New York show in 1977, July, Bowie came on stage to introduce the second set and announced, "This is the band of the future. I'm going to produce them in Tokyo this winter." Finally, it was settled that the record would be produced by Eno in Germany, with Bowie contributing only on weekends. He was busy making the movie Just a Gigolo. Oh man, I better check that out. We don't even have a record deal, but Eno said he'd pay for the flights, the studio costs, everything, said Mothersbaugh. Eno was just certain we would get a record contract. Sure enough, Warner Brothers, Island, and Bowie's production company, Bellway Brothers, began competing for the group. Sick was hot, and DEVO looked like the next gang of marketable monsters after the Sex Pistols. Then Virgin entered the fray. In early 1978, Richard Branson invited Mothersbaugh and guitarist Bob Cassell to fly to Jamaica. When the boys were very stoned, Branson popped the question, what do they think about inviting Johnny Rotten, freshly fired from the Pistols, to become DEVO's singer. He said, "Johnny's in the next room. There are journalists from NME and Melody Maker here," recalls Mother Spa. "It's a perfect time to go down the beach, take some photos together, and announce he's joined DEVO. What do you think?" I was too stoned to make the correct answer, which was, "Sure!" Because we could have done the picture session, got the publicity, and then gone back to Akron and just said, "No way, forget it." Still embroiled in negotiations with record labels, DEVO recorded their debut, Q, Are We Not Men? Hey, we are DEVO, in Connie Plank's studio, a converted farm 20 miles outside of Cologne. It's their masterpiece, but suffers slightly from a neither one thing nor the other quality. It lacks some of the frenzy of their live shows, yet is not a full-on foray into Eno's post-low sound world. In retrospect, we were overly resistant to Eno's ideas, says Mothersbaugh. He made up synth parts and really cool sounds for almost every song on the album, but we used them on only 3 or 4 songs. Some we did, like the loop of the Monkey Chanters that's on Jocko Homo. I'd kind of like to hear what the album would have sounded like if we'd been more open to Eno's suggestions, but in those days, we thought we knew everything. All right. I think I'll stop there for now. The story about Johnny Rotten has got me curious because I have pulled my copy of Rotten by John Lydon, his autobiography, the 90s version of it before he redid it and re-released it with some other chapters, probably edited some stuff out. I don't know. I haven't read the new version, but I wonder if he mentions it in there, and I'm going to pause and check right now. The reason why I had the Rotten book out was because it is another one of the books I plan to read you passages from over the course of the Patreon feed. And now that I've gone this long on this episode, I will probably save what I was going to read here from his introduction about the Sex Pistols and stuff in general before he gets into his life story. I'll probably say that for the next episode, but let me check for the Richard Branson anecdote in there about DEVO, and I'll be right back. All right, so much to my disappointment, I forgot there's no index in the back of Rotten. No Irish, no blacks, no dogs is the full title of the book that I have. It looks like when I go to the Internet Archive, which is archive.org, I see a couple of different publications of it, a couple different, editions of it. And I did a little Control F search through Rotten, and the word DEVO does not come up at all. Let me try Richard Branson in quotes. But as I was flipping through the book manually, with my hands, manual, the meaning of the word, to just try to see if there's any mention of it towards the end. And now towards the end, they're still talking about the Pistols breaking up and stuff, or not just the breakup, but the aftermath and arguing about Malcolm McLaren and him taking the boys down to South America and crap. There's mentions of Richard Branson in the book about him and what he likes about him and Virgin Records, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, then if I look into Anger is an Energy, My Life Uncensored, which I don't know if that's like a republishing of Rotten with new stuff added or if it is an entirely different book. It's 537 pages long. It looks like Rotten is 356. So I'm assuming it's just like adding on to the original. But DEVO is mentioned 3 times. Page 191 and 192. So I will click the Borrow for 1 hour button on the screen. By the way, there's also a book called John Lydon, PIL, Pistols, and Anti-Celebrity, written by a dude named Benjamin Myers from 2004 that I'm going to check out. It's 257 pages, and there's no mention of there's one mention of DEVO, but it's just talking about the American punk scene in the late 70s. So no, not what we're looking for today. Let's see now. It's from the chapter Getting Rid of the Albatross. Let me check my time here. I don't want to run into... Okay, there we go. Gunter Grove became my backdrop to get myself properly sorted out and a new group off the ground. So I assume this is post-Pistols and pre-PIL. I was at one of my parties there. It was at one of my parties there that I met Gloria Knight, who was actually a writer for the Sunday Mirror and was married to her editor. We kind of met through someone else in a roundabout social way, and it just seemed deeply hilarious to be hanging around with anyone that had any connection at all with what I viewed as the gossip rags. They'd been making my life a misery for the last year or so. It was like this. Ooh, this shouldn't work. But it did. Good came out of it and bad came with it. She suggested that I needed a lawyer. There was some weird stuff going on around us while we were in Jamaica. McLaren had got some of his people out there, sneaking around trying to film me for his idiotic movie, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Also, Branson had DEVO, an electronic band from Ohio who were signed to Virgin out there, or at least some of them. He may or may not have been trying to get me to be their singer. I certainly don't think he ever asked me. Sometimes inebriations lead to foolishness. I know we caught one of them spying on us. He'd come down onto our balcony. He was looking through the curtains, and Dennis frightened him off. That was really my only connection with them. The idea of joining a band like DEVO, replacing the lead singer, would be an absolute no-no to me. It would make me very angry. That was Malcolm's idea with the Pistols towards the end, replacing me. You can't replace the singer. It will always be the band for me, the singer. That's the direction and the persona and the energy of the thing, particularly with DEVO. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little Patreon mini glimpse for the main feed, folks. I'll certainly be dropping a couple more samples as time goes on. It'll be like this. It'll be 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes tops, I think. Anyway, I'm going to go back to finishing up the first Guns N' Roses Deadpool episode that is coming out in the next 24 to 48 hours. And that's the Deadpool with Dirty Harry, not the incredibly entertaining Ryan Reynolds superhero film. Lucky you. But come on, it's got Guns N' Roses in it and Jim Carrey as their lead singer and Liam Neeson. He's kind of like the evil version of his character in Satisfaction, if you know what I mean. Hopefully you know what I mean.